In today's lesson in wood technology, we are going to look at the topic of plastic. Plastics are used often in wood technology as part of a project along with wooden material. Plastics are also found all around us. So they're found in CDs, TVs. A lot of TVs are made out of plastic now, such as the case around them. Even the screens are made out of plastic. The phones that people have with them, a lot of them are based on plastics with some metals used in them. PCs, the cases of PCs, the keyboards, the housing for the monitors are all made out of plastic. Cars also have a lot of components made out of plastic, such as the car bumpers now, and also some of the panels on cars are now made out of plastic. And also all the interior parts. If you sit into a car, you're looking at a lot of plastic. Now, packaging in our food shopping, a lot of our food comes packed in plastic, which is highlighted in recent reports about the amount of waste plastic that is being produced by packaging food. The main issue with plastics is they do not degrade easily, so disposal of them is a problem. So what we mean by that is when you have a piece of plastic and you're finished with it, it's really hard to get rid of. So a lot of these plastics end up in landfill. Some plastics are able to be recycled. There are two groups of plastic: thermoplastics and thermosetting. Now, the advantages of plastic are they're durable, so that means long lasting. They will not rust or corrode. They're good insulators, so they're used in insulation for houses and also insulation on wires so that you don't get electric shocks off wires. Now, they're resistant to chemicals. So, for example, you can pour acid into a plastic container and it won't disintegrate. Now, they can be formed into complex shapes. So, for example, if you think of a keyboard on a computer, it's a really complicated shape, but plastic can be molded into these shapes quite easily. Now, disadvantages of plastics are they're expensive, they're not friendly to the environment, and we'll look at that later in the lesson. What's the issues with plastics and the environment? They don't break down easily. Again, that's to do with disposal of them. They don't rot or anything, and if you dump a piece of plastic into landfill, it's going to be there for a couple thousand years. And then the other disadvantage is they need a lot of energy to produce them in the first place. Now, types of plastic. So the first type of plastic we're going to look at is thermosetting. Now, thermosetting plastics are rigid, they're strong, they're very high resistant to heat. Once they're shaped and set, they can't be reshaped or reheated. So what we're thinking about is, if you think of saucepans that you have at home, frying pan, the handle of it is more than likely made out of plastic. Even the controls on your cooker at home, they're all made out of plastic, and a lot of the time, what it is, they're suffering, they're going to have a lot of heat against them. So that's why they're all made from a thermosetting plastic. Now, if we think of thermosetting plastics, the first one we look at here is epoxy resin. That's used in adhesive. So adhesive is another word for glues. And then circuit boards. So inside in all electronic devices, you have epoxy resin making up these circuit boards. Now, down here we have polyurethane, so polyester. So what we have is the bottles, then sports jerseys, uniforms. So if you look at the label on your uniform, you'll notice that it's more than likely made from polyester. And then another type then is melamine, so chipboard and plates. So what you see is some plastic plates will be made from thermosetting plastic, because if you put plastic plates into a dishwasher where it's suffering from heat, it won't melt while the dishwasher is washing them. So that's why they're made from a thermosetting plastic. Melamine then is a chipboard, manufactured board with plastic stuck on the outside of it. So in a lot of furniture, it's made from melamine, where there's a veneer, plastic veneer put on the outside of it. Next type of plastic is thermoplastic. Now, thermoplastics can be heated, molded, and then reshaped over and over again. So they can be shaped quite a lot of times. So if we look at a few examples of thermosetting, we've got acrylic, so commonly known as Perspex, found in the wood technology room and also the metalwork room. Next type here, we've got polythene. So polythene, familiar with most people, plastic bags, food packaging, shampoo, bottles, and also what we have here is we've cling film here used for wrapping food. So that's all made from polythene. Next one here, we've got nylon. So nylon is used for seat belts, also for sportswear, for ropes, also used in gears. And then finally we have here is polyvinyl chloride, commonly known as PVC. So windows, doors, water hoses. So exam question that could be asked on polyvinyl chloride is, what does PVC stand for? So it stands for polyvinyl chloride. And then we have our polystyrene, rigid and expanded, so ties disposable dinnerware such as a takeaway box there, also used in insulation material for houses. Now the uses of Perspex and other types of plastics in the woodwork room. Acrylic is the main type that's used. Now the reason it's used is it's available in large quantity of colours and sizes. Now it can be cut, drilled, bent, shaped very easily with the correct tools. Now what we have here is we have a strip heater that's used for bending plastics. We have another project here that we've put in epoxy resin with colour in it to fill the gap between two pieces of timber. And then what we have here is we have a money box here with a piece of Perspex on the front of the money box to show how full the money box is. Next we're going to look at how you finish acrylic. To finish acrylic, first of all you place the piece of plastic in the vise. In the diagram here, this shows how you cross-file it. So when you want to wear down a piece of Perspex onto the line, you cross-file it. To draw file it then, in the second diagram, you'll see the difference where you push the file with your two hands along the edge. Now, this will give you a smooth finish on the piece of Perspex. Next, we sand it down with a piece of sandpaper, and then final touch then is to get polish, and we polish it down to a smooth edge. Next, we look at drilling Perspex. Now, drilling Perspex can be difficult at times because Perspex is a soft material, so sometimes it cracks if you don't drill it correctly. When we're drilling Perspex, how we do this is we support the piece of Perspex with a piece of wood underneath it, so that when we're drilling through the piece of Perspex, it won't burst through the opposite side. The reason why we need to drill all the way through Perspex is it's only 3mm or 5mm in thickness, so we can't drill in from both sides. So you have to drill all the way through Perspex. The main key things about how you drill Perspex is you place this drill at a fast speed and then a low feed. So what this means is you make sure the drill bit is spinning as quick as possible, and then when you grab the handle of the drill to lower the drill bit into the plastic, you pull it nice and slowly down into the plastic. So that's what's meant by a slow feed rate. Now, all this is held in the vise on the drill. So remember, the rules are fast drill speed and slow feed rate. When we're bending plastics, we need to use a strip heater. So in the photograph here, we have a diagram of a strip heater. So what it looks like. Now, there is a gap in the strip heater where a wire passes through. This wire gets warm, and what happens then is it melts or heats up and softens the plastic along the line on which you want to bend. Now, this is a diagram showing the inside of the strip heater. So you have the heating element, which is the red dot, and that sends out heat. That heats the piece of plastic where you want to bend it. Next thing then is to form this piece of plastic. So what we have here is we have a design here on a piece of plastic. So we have the development, which is the piece of plastic folded out flat, and what we've done here is we've shaped it into the desired shape. Next, We put the piece of Perspex or plastic on the strip heater, and then what we do is heat it up and then bend it into shape. So the piece that you bend it around is known as the former. So the former can be at 90 degrees like the example here, or it can be at an angle. So if you want to bend a piece of plastic at an angle of 60 degrees, you need to have a former made at an angle of 60 degrees. But this is how you bend and form plastic into different shapes.
Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use the line bender to thermoform thermoplastics. Okay, so this is a typical thermoplastic. This is acrylic or polymethyl methacrylate, PMMA, if you want to get technical. Okay, and you'll notice that the acrylic comes with this protective plastic layer. Okay, now for thermoforming, it's probably best that you kind of take this off at some point. However, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to leave it on because it will just show me where I can mark these. Now, if you're marking out your bends for the acrylic for the line bender, you'll probably have a paper template already with lines marked, okay? But because we haven't got that, we're gonna leave it on so I can see where my pencil marks are. Now, I'm gonna be line bending using a bending jig as well. Now, you can just simply place this under here, heat it up for thermoforming and just bend it, okay? But what I'm gonna do is use a jig, and what the jig allows me to do in this case is it allows me for repeatable accuracy. So if I bend this once and I put my lines in the right positions, I can get another piece of acrylic and ensure by using the same jig I'll get the same outcome over and over again. And this is what manufacturers do to ensure they get consistency in their products, and it assures the quality of the overall product. So for here I'm going to do my first bend at this point here, so I'm just going to literally mark with a pencil on the plastic there, and it gives me a point to reference when I place it under the line bender. Now my line bender has been switched on for quite a while now, so it's already warmed up and heated up. Looking at the top of the line bender, a bit of health and safety, what we've got to be careful of is this line here, okay? This is the actual line that's going to get hot on the line bender or strip heater, okay? So we keep our hands, fingers well away from this position, okay? And what I am going to do is with my fingers, just using this guard, which doesn't get too warm, I'm going to lift it up and then pull it back slightly, and what should happen is it just sits in a slightly upward position. You can notice I can slide this underneath and position it. Now I'm going to place this under, looking for my mark where I put this, okay? Now what I want to happen as well is for this to be completely level. Now ideally I'd mark it either side, but if I don't have that in case, I can always line it up against this little ruler here to check that this is square, it's at 90 degrees. Now when I'm sure of that, I can again go back to this guard, I can lift it up and push it forwards, and then it will drop down and just hold this tight. You can see that's now gripping it. Now I'm just going to reposition it very slightly to make sure I've got this completely square, and it's at 90 degrees with the heating element just above where I'm placed that little line there, okay? And now we have to leave it. Now thermoplastics, a group of plastics, there's three general plastics, thermoplastics being one of them, and the thermoplastics, what makes them special is they have what's called plastic memory, okay? So plastic memory means that if I heat up this plastic, I can then bend it. If I heat it up again, it remembers what it was in its previous state. So it remembers it was a sheet, and it will, by heating it up again, try to go back to that original shape. It will try to go back to its original form. It will remember that, okay? Now, the other two main types of plastics are thermosetting plastics and elastomers. Elastomers, like the word sounds, elastic, okay, are basically polymers or plastics that have a sort of a degree of elasticity, which means you can stretch them and they sort of ping back to their original shape. They are also thermoplastic as well, so they have those plastic memory properties. The other key group, which are not used for many things other than sort of electrical fittings and high quality plastic goods, are thermosetting plastics. And the clue again is in the name, thermoset. This means they set. So once they're in their desired form, you've formed them into a shape, they will be set in that form, and if you heat them up again, they will not be able to form back, okay? But we're using the thermoplastics, which have that plastic memory. If we go back to our thermoplastic piece, this has been sitting over the line bender now for the desired time, around about 105 seconds, okay? But what I generally do to test this is I keep sort of working it, I keep feeling it with my hand over here, okay? Now what we're after is a level of flexibility in this this plastic, okay? And my rule of thumb is I should use a very small finger like this and just lightly lift it on one side, and you can see if that freely moves and pings around, we know that's kind of ready to be thermoformed, okay? So what I'm going to do is repeat the process but in reverse. So I lift my guard up and bring it backwards, making sure that it doesn't fall out of the front of the guard like this, and I carefully slide this out. Now I've got to be quite quick at this stage, and I'm going to use my jig, and I'm just going to bend it, pre-bend it, and then slide it into the jig so that I'm holding it into place. Now at this point you might wish to put some gauntlets on if you know you're going to be sort of have issues holding it in place and you might need to touch the hot area, but because I'm quite well versed with this, I'm just going to hold it in the two positions here to support it so it can't move, and that ensures that that will be in the right position. Okay, now I've just got to hold this probably for around about a minute, and that will be cool. And the way we'll know this is if I take it apart, it won't start springing back to its original shape. Okay, so you can see I'm going to hold it there a little bit longer, and we should find, there we go, we've got a firm piece. Okay, it's been set in that position, or temporarily set in that position. Now if I did make an error at this point, I could put it back over the heat and it would, due to its plastic memory, form back. Okay, but once I've done my first bend there, I'm basically ready to do the next one if I was going to bend it over.
The final section of this topic now is where we look at plastics and our environment. So to start off here is what we try and do is we try to recycle plastic items and materials that we can find around and use it in wood technology. Now, for example, what we have here is we have waste packaging here where we've used it to decorate. So this might happen in an art class, or it might happen in a wood art class where we're designing a bird feeder here in the shape of a bird, and we're using packaging that we have at home to form this bird feeder. Next we have here a sweet jar. So what we've done here is we've recycled maybe a plastic jar for the top of it there. So we can recycle that rather than throwing that into our waste bin at home. And then what we have here is quite a clever solution regarding a shampoo bottle that mightn't be able to be recycled. And what we've done is we've repurposed the use of it, where we've made it into an item that will hold a mobile phone while it's charging, plugged into the wall. Now, using plastics. The majority of our plastics we use are made from fossil fuels such as natural gas, coal and oil. Now, obviously these are fossil fuels, so they have to be taken out of the earth, and there's only a limited supply of these. So what we have is there is a major effect by taking these out of the ground, because it causes major pollution. So what we can see here is when we're taking it, extracting it or mining it, there's pollution created. Then when we're processing the raw materials in the factory, what we're doing is we're creating more pollution, and at the end of this what we end up with is our plastic products. So it's a major pollution to our natural environment when we're creating plastic in the first place. Now, the second thing about plastic and why it's not good for the environment is a lot of these plastics are synthetic. What synthetic means, they're made from chemicals. So what it is, it takes them hundreds if not thousands of years to break down or fully decompose. Now this plastic is in our oceans as well, and there's a part of the ocean which has a giant garbage patch which is devastating to, would say, wildlife. So in the picture here you're shown the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a large section in the Pacific Ocean that is made up of waste plastic materials. Now, the size of this is, it is now bigger than France, Germany and Spain all combined. So the land mass of them three countries combined, that's how much space it's taken up. Now, obviously, if animals end up in this, it'll kill most animals from them eating plastic. So what we have here is, we have a turtle here that has eaten some plastic and has died from the result of it. Now, what happens to plastic waste that we can't recycle? So some plastics that we have at home can't be recycled. So what we have to look at is what happens to them. So most of our plastic waste in countries such as Ireland cannot be easily recycled locally and is exported to Asian countries instead. Now, the problem in these Asian countries is that some of the governments don't enforce the laws properly. So a lot of this ends up in landfills. So for example here, we have a landfill here of plastic that's probably originated in Europe, some of it from Ireland, and it's going into a landfill in Malaysia instead of being recycled. So we have to be very important. It's very important that we look at when we buy something with plastic, can it be recycled? If not, where do we think this plastic is going to end up? And would it be better if we bought the item, if it was say in a plastic bottle, would it be better if we bought it in a glass bottle instead? The other major effect now is there's a plastic known as microbeads. These are tiny bits of plastic that are used in cosmetic and cleaning products such as face wash, shower gels that we use, and toothpaste. So they're little tiny beads of plastic. So in the photograph here you can see these tiny beads of plastic. Now these tiny beads go down our sinks, goes into our rivers, our lakes and our oceans, and then they work their way back through the food chain because they end up in, we'll say, fish that are in the ocean. We catch the fish and then we eat the fish. So we end up having these plastic beads in our bodies. Now, many countries are now banning the use of microbeads in these plastics because they don't biodegrade easily, and it's possibly going to damage wildlife and human life by ingesting all of these microbeads. Now, the diagram here shows the sad fact that an average person eats about 70,000 microbeads of plastic each year. So what we have here, the people here, first they buy this plastic bag. This plastic bag would have microbeads maybe used in it, in the manufacture of it. These microbeads end up in the ocean. The fish don't see these microbeads and just eat them. We then eat the fish, so that's how we end up with 70,000 microbeads per year in our bodies. Now, there's always alternatives when we're dealing with plastics. So what we have here is 4 ways that we can look at how we can deal better with plastics. So we can recycle plastics and repurpose them. We can buy and use reusable plastic items such as the water bottle here. We can try and avoid buying single-use plastics. And finally then, we can check that all the plastics that we buy can be recycled. So what you'll see here is all the symbols up on plastic will have this recycling symbol. That means it can be recycled.